I always knew my son, Jake, was different. From the moment he could hold a device, he was drawn to screens, not for cartoons or games like other kids, but for patterns, numbers, and logic puzzles. By the time he was 6, he was solving problems I couldn't begin to understand. By 8, he was coding his own programs, his fingers dancing across the keyboard with an ease that seemed almost instinctual. Jake wasn't like other children, and I was fine with that. He was quiet, introspective, and preferred the company of a laptop over a group of kids his age. Socially, he struggled. Small talk baffled him, and playground games held no appeal. But in the world of programming, he flourished. It was his language, his playground, and his sanctuary. Not everyone saw his uniqueness as a gift, though. My sister, Karen, had always been the type to believe in rigid definitions of normal. To her, a child like Jake, reserved, laser-focused, and uninterested in traditional play, was cause for concern. She was convinced that something was wrong with him. "You need to get him checked," she would say during family gatherings, her voice laced with thinly veiled judgment. It's not normal for a child to be that isolated. What if he has something serious? I would reassure her, time and time again, that Jake was fine. He was just wired differently, and that was okay. But Karen wasn't convinced. Her casual concerns soon turned into something more urgent, more forceful. She started bringing up specialists, mental health facilities, and therapies she had researched online. It was frustrating, but I never imagined she would take things further. That was my mistake. I didn't see the warning signs. The way she watched Jake with narrowed eyes, the hushed conversations she had with other family members, or the way she seemed to gather evidence of his supposed abnormalities. To her, my son wasn't a gifted child. He was a problem that needed to be solved. And then one day, she decided to solve it herself. From the outside looking in, Jake might have seemed like an ordinary quiet kid. He wasn't one to make eye contact for long, and he rarely engaged in small talk unless it was about something that genuinely fascinated him. But beneath that quiet exterior was a mind that worked at lightning speed, capable of processing complex concepts most adults would struggle to grasp. His love for coding started innocently enough, just a simple drag-and-drop coding game when he was 5. But while other kids quickly lost interest, Jake became obsessed. Within weeks, he had moved beyond the basics, teaching himself syntax and logic structures from YouTube tutorials. By the time he turned 7, he was writing Python scripts to automate small tasks around the house, like adjusting the brightness on his tablet, depending on the time of day. It wasn't just that he understood coding. It was the way he saw it, as if programming languages were second nature to him. He would talk about algorithms with a kind of effortless fluency, explaining concepts to me in ways that almost made me believe I understood them, too. But for all his brilliance, Jake struggled in ways I wished I could protect him from. School was a challenge, not academically, but socially. His teachers recognized that he was gifted, often giving him advanced work to keep him engaged, but his classmates didn't quite know what to make of him. He wasn't interested in sports or lunchtime gossip. He didn't laugh at the jokes other kids found funny. And that's where Karen's concerns began to grow. He barely interacts with anyone, she pointed out one evening over dinner. That's not healthy. Kids need friends, not just computers. He's fine, Karen. I replied, keeping my tone even. He's happy doing what he loves. She shook her head, unconvinced. No, he's isolated. He never looks people in the eye. He hardly talks. Have you considered autism? ADHD? Something else? He needs to be evaluated. I sighed. It wasn't the first time she'd brought this up. I understood where she was coming from. Jake wasn't like most kids, but I had done my research, spoken to professionals, and most importantly, I had listened to my son. He wasn't struggling. He was thriving in his own way. But Karen didn't see it that way. She started keeping a closer eye on him, analyzing his every movement, every habit. And the more she watched, the more convinced she became that Jake wasn't just different. He was broken. And Karen had never been one to sit idly by when she thought something needed fixing. At first, I brushed off Karen's concerns as nothing more than overprotectiveness. She had always been the type to meddle, to believe that her way was the only right way. I assumed she would eventually drop the subject, that she'd get tired of repeating the same arguments. But she didn't. Instead, her concerns intensified. She started bringing up Jake's condition at every opportunity, slipping it into conversations even when it wasn't relevant. It wasn't just polite concern anymore. It was an obsession. He doesn't respond to his name half the time. She noted one afternoon as she watched Jake, who was deeply engrossed in debugging a program on his laptop. That's a red flag. He's focused, I corrected. You know, like when you're watching one of your crime shows and don't hear your phone ring. Karen ignored my comment. He's always talking about codes and numbers, but never about real life. That's not normal. I rolled my eyes. It is for him. Her scrutiny didn't stop at observations. She started asking invasive questions about Jake's habits, his sleeping patterns, and even what foods he liked. She researched different diagnoses, convinced she would find the one that explained his behavior. Every time we spoke, she had a new theory. He might have Asperger's. Have you checked for OCD? He's too fixated on routines. There's something called childhood disintegrative disorder. It's rare, but... I cut her off that time. Karen, stop. But she didn't. One night, I overheard her talking to my mother on the phone. I'm telling you, he's getting worse. He barely acknowledges people. He's locked in that laptop all day. This isn't just a phase. If she won't do something, maybe we should. I felt my stomach tighten. I wanted to believe she was just venting her frustration, that she wouldn't actually take action. But I had underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go. A week later, I found out she had contacted a child psychologist without telling me. She had scheduled a consultation, providing details about Jake's troubling behavior, painting a picture of a child who was slipping away into some detached, unresponsive state. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. I'm doing what's best for him, she said firmly, arms crossed over her chest. If you won't take responsibility, someone has to. I was livid. Karen, you don't get to make those decisions. He's my son. He needs help, she snapped. And if you won't get it for him, I will. I should have realized then that she wasn't just talking. She had already decided to take matters into her own hands. I just didn't know how far she would go. I thought the worst Karen could do was pressure me into taking Jake to a specialist. I assumed that, at most, she would keep nagging me until she finally accepted that I wasn't going to give in. I was wrong. It started with a knock at the door. Firm, professional, the kind that sends a chill down your spine before you even open it. When I pulled the door open, I was met with two people. A woman in a blazer holding a clipboard and a man standing slightly behind her with a calm but authoritative expression. "Ms. Carter?" the woman asked. "I'm Dr. Reynolds, a child psychologist, and this is Mr. Tate from Child Protective Services. We receive a report about concerns regarding your son's well-being. We'd like to ask you a few questions." My stomach dropped. I barely heard the words after that. A report? Who would? Karen. The realization hit me like a slap. She had actually done it. She had called professionals, painted Jake as some neglected, mentally unstable child. And now they were here, evaluating whether my son should be taken away from me. I forced myself to stay calm, even as my heart pounded in my chest. "There must be some mistake," I said, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. "Who exactly made this report?" "We can't disclose that information," Mr. Tate said smoothly. "But we do take these matters seriously. May we come in?" I wanted to slam the door in their faces. I wanted to call Karen and scream at her. But most of all, I wanted to protect Jake. So I stepped aside. Jake was sitting on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. He glanced up briefly before returning his focus to the lines of code on his screen. The professionals exchanged glances. That was all it took for my blood to boil. I could already see them assessing, interpreting, twisting his behavior to fit their narrative. "Can you tell us a little about Jake's daily life?" Dr. Reynolds asked, flipping through her notes. "We understand that he spends a lot of time alone. Is that correct?" "He's not alone," I corrected. "He's focused. He's a programmer, an incredible one. He's working on things most adults couldn't even begin to understand." Dr. Reynolds nodded in that careful, neutral way that made it clear she wasn't convinced. Has he ever been evaluated for any developmental disorders? I clenched my jaw. No, because there's nothing wrong with him. Mr. Tate spoke up. We're not here to make accusations, Ms. Carter. We just want to ensure that Jake is getting the support he needs. If you're open to it, we'd like to speak with him directly. My instinct screamed to refuse, but I knew that would only make me look defensive. I swallowed my fear and turned to Jake. Sweetheart, these people would like to ask you a few questions. Is that okay? Jake looked up, blinking at them, then at me. Okay. Dr. Reynolds gave him a gentle smile. Hi, Jake. I hear you're really good with computers. Jake nodded. I like coding. What kind of things do you work on? Jake tilted his head, as if deciding how much to explain. Then, in his usual straightforward way, he answered, Right now, I'm testing an AI model to detect security vulnerabilities in networks. I wrote the algorithm myself. Dr. Reynolds blinked. I see. I also designed a game last month, Jake continued. It's kind of like a mix between Minecraft and Redstone logic, but with real programming functions. I uploaded it online and a bunch of people downloaded it. There was a long pause. Mr. Tate cleared his throat. That's impressive. Karen had sent them expecting to find a withdrawn, unresponsive child, but instead, they were met with a boy whose intelligence was so far beyond his years that they didn't even know how to process it. For the first time since they arrived, I felt the tide turning. Dr. Reynolds sat up a little straighter, clearly trying to maintain her professional demeanor, but I could see the surprise flicker across her face. Mr. Tate, who had been taking notes, stopped writing altogether. Jake, meanwhile, remained completely unfazed. He didn't realize the weight of what he had just said. To him, programming an AI model or developing a game from scratch wasn't extraordinary. It was just what he did for fun. Dr. Reynolds composed herself and leaned forward slightly. That sounds very advanced, Jake. How did you learn to do all that? Jake shrugged. I read a lot, and I experiment. If I don't understand something, I find the answer. The simplicity of his answer seemed to leave them at a loss. I could see it, their mental gears turning as they reassessed everything they had been told before arriving. They had come expecting to find a neglected, emotionally detached child. Instead, they were facing a prodigy. Karen, who had been sitting on the edge of her seat, finally found her voice. See, she said, grasping at straws. That's not normal. A child shouldn't be spending all his time doing whatever this is. He doesn't play sports. He doesn't have real friends. That's not healthy. Jake frowned, finally looking up at her. I do have friends. Karen scoffed. Oh, really? Who? Jake turned his laptop around, showing his screen. A chat window was open with several usernames discussing lines of code, offering suggestions, sharing ideas. We're working on a project together. Some of them are in college, and one of them works at a tech company. He looked at Karen with a hint of confusion. Just because I don't see them in person doesn't mean they're not my friends. Dr. Reynolds glanced at me, as if waiting for my reaction. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride. Jake collaborates with people from all over the world. He's learning, growing, and contributing in ways most kids never get the chance to. He's not isolated. He's connected in a different way. Mr. Tate, who had remained mostly silent, finally spoke. Karen, you mentioned concerns about Jake's emotional well-being. Have you ever seen any signs that he's unhappy? Karen hesitated. Well, he doesn't act like other kids. Dr. Reynolds tapped her pen against her clipboard. Not all children express joy in the same way. Jake seems comfortable, engaged, and passionate about his interests. That's not a sign of distress. That's a sign of thriving. Karen's face turned red, but he doesn't make eye contact. He barely interacts with us. Jake tilted his head. I don't need to make eye contact to listen. The room fell silent. Dr. Reynolds let out a small chuckle, then turned to me. Ms. Carter, I don't see any reason to believe Jake is in any danger, nor do I see any justification for institutionalization. In fact, I would recommend looking into special programs that support gifted children in STEM fields. He's clearly operating at a level far beyond his age group. Karen looked like she had been slapped. Wait, but Mr. Tate closed his folder. Ms. Carter, do you have any concerns about Jake's well-being that you'd like to discuss? I exhaled, the tension finally releasing from my shoulders. None at all. He's happy, and that's what matters. Dr. Reynolds nodded. Then I believe we're done here. Karen sat in stunned silence as they stood to leave. Her entire argument had just crumbled in front of her, and she had no idea how to recover. I walked them to the door, shaking their hands. As they left, Dr. Reynolds smiled. You have an exceptional son, Ms. Carter. Encourage him. The world needs more minds like his. The moment the door closed behind them, I turned to Karen. What the hell were you thinking? She opened her mouth, but for once, she had nothing to say. For the first time since this whole ordeal started, Karen looked shaken. She had walked into this expecting validation, expecting professionals to confirm her worst fears and force my hand. Instead, she had been completely and utterly dismissed. I folded my arms, my anger barely contained. You called CPS on me, Karen. You tried to have my son institutionalized. What were you thinking? She fumbled for a response. I was just trying to help. You're too close to see it, but Jake isn't normal. I thought if professionals intervened, they could... Could what? Take him away? Put him in some facility? Drug him until he acted normal enough for you? My voice rose, and I didn't care. He's a genius, Karen. Not broken. Not sick. And you just put his entire future at risk because you couldn't accept that. Karen's face twisted in frustration. You're being dramatic. I didn't want him taken away. I just wanted someone to evaluate him properly. You're in denial, and someone had to step in. I shook my head, incredulous. No, Karen, what you did was cruel. You called strangers into my home to judge my parenting, to analyze Jake like he was some kind of case study. You humiliated him. She bristled. I didn't humiliate him. I was looking out for him. No, you were looking out for yourself. I snapped. You were uncomfortable with how different he is, so you tried to fix him. But he doesn't need fixing. He needs support, encouragement, not a family member who thinks he's defective. Karen's expression flickered, guilt finally creeping in. But it was too late for remorse. I don't want you around Jake anymore, I said firmly. Her eyes widened. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. You crossed a line. You went behind my back. You put my family through unnecessary scrutiny, and worst of all, you made Jake feel like there was something wrong with him. Until you can accept him for who he is. I don't want you in his life. Karen's lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She had no defense. She stood there for a long moment before finally grabbing her purse and storming toward the door. Fine, she spat, but don't come crying to me when he grows up and realizes he never had a real childhood. I didn't even flinch. I just opened the door and watched her walk out. The second the door clicked shut behind her, I felt a massive weight lift off my chest. I turned to find Jake standing in the hallway, watching me carefully. Are you okay, Mom? He asked. I took a deep breath and smiled. I am now. In the days following Karen's departure, our home felt lighter, calmer. There was no more tension hanging over us, no more hushed conversations about what was wrong with Jake. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could truly breathe. Jake, in typical fashion, seemed largely unaffected. He went right back to coding, diving into his latest project as if nothing had happened. But I knew he had understood everything. One evening, as I was making dinner, he spoke up. I knew Aunt Karen didn't like how I am. He said matter-of-factly, she thought I was weird. I turned to face him, my heart aching at the realization that he had noticed more than I'd hoped. You're not weird, sweetheart. You're brilliant. He nodded. I know. A small, confident smile played on his lips. I don't think like other people, but that's not a bad thing. I couldn't have been prouder. Despite everything Karen had done, despite the way she had tried to make him feel broken, Jake had never doubted himself. He had never once believed he was anything less than extraordinary. And he was right. With Karen out of the picture, I focused on finding new opportunities for him. I enrolled him in an advanced STEM program where he could connect with other kids who shared his passions. I reached out to mentors in the tech world, people who saw his potential and wanted to help him grow. He thrived. Before long, Jake was working on projects with professionals twice his age. He was being recognized for his skills, invited to coding competitions, even receiving offers to collaborate on real-world applications. At just 10 years old, my son was already making an impact. One afternoon, I got an email from a prestigious tech institute inviting Jake to participate in a summer program designed for young prodigies. When I told him about it, his face lit up with excitement. "Do you think Aunt Karen would be surprised?" he asked with a mischievous glint in his eye. I chuckled. "Oh, I think she'd be shocked." Jake grinned. "Good." I pulled him into a hug, holding him close. "No matter what anyone says, you keep being exactly who you are. The world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs more people like you." He hugged me back. "I know, Mom." And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, Jake would be just fine, because he had something far more valuable than Karen's approval. He had confidence in himself. And that was something no one could take away from him.